Hey everybody, this is Steve Jordan, and hey, I'm in the Elders Quorum right now, but I also work with the Temple and Family History Committee, and I just wanted to share with you a story from my own family history. This is actually a story that my dad has told me a couple times. I remember him telling me this story when I was just a boy here, but it was about his uh, uncle on my I didn't know who he was, but it's my uncle Charlie Madison. And I'm a Jordan, and my grandmother's my dad's mother is a Dial, and it's her maiden name. And so I don't know who this guy is, Charlie Madison. I don't know or I don't recognize. We got some Sigris and some Dials and some Jordans back in my dad's side of the family, but I don't know this name Madison. So I did a little research into it and I found it. I found some stuff that I wanted to share with you guys. So first of all, some of you may know that I was born in Alabama and lived there till I was age 10. I born in the Prattville, Alabama, and also lived in Millbrook, Millbrook, Alabama. But this is about way over here in Demopolis, Alabama, by this Rooster Bridge. And so, anyway, my the Charlie Madison, he tells me this story, and which I'm going to share with you here. But I didn't know who Charlie was or what's my relationship to Charlie Madison. So you can see that I was able to do some research here on FamilySearch.org. So I put in Charlie Madison. I knew he was a male, and I know it was my grandmother's time frame. So I just put in 1880 to 1980, and I found a whole bunch of Charlie Madisons. Well, with some digging, I figured out that it's this Charlie Hybert Madison. Okay, and he was born in 1916 in Uriah, Alabama, and died in Atmore, Alabama. And so, who is he? So I can actually go up here and see my relationship to my dad's uncle Charlie, as he called him. And so here's me, and there's my dad, Ross Stephen Jordan, and there's his mother, Vivian Dial Jordan. That's my sweet grandma Jordan, who, she had 12 kids. And frankly, she was one of the Mormon pioneers in Alabama. She was one of the first members of the church, and just a real strong lady and super sweet, and remembered everybody. Had about 50 or some crazy number of kids and grandkids, something like that. I think it was about 55 or 60, 'cause she had 12 kids. And but here's her sister, Daisy Llewellyn Dial, who married Charlie Hybert Madison. So here he is as we go back into Charlie. And so he was, you know, and you can see that he was one of 10 children. Okay, so they had some big families around there. Well, so digging around here, and there's some memories. There's my dad's uncle Charlie and his sister, or excuse me, his wife, Aunt Llewellyn Dial. And so he's my great uncle. And anyway, in here I find these different memories, and And lo and behold, here is the story that my dad had shared with me. So I'm going to actually read this through. It's a couple minutes long here. This story is about a very large, over the road, heavy duty truck. And this is my dad's words here that he wrote and posted on the family search. So this story is about a very large, over the road, heavy duty truck and trailer owned and driven cross country by my uncle, Charlie Madison. I got the story by visiting my uncle Charlie with my family when I was about 14, and he was in the hospital in Demopolis, Alabama, in the late 1950s or early 60s. More coming about the hospital and the wreck that put him there. First of all, this truck was large. Like Mack trucks have always been, and very tough because they were built so strong and with the best steel in the frames. I know because I worked for several years in a truck shop that straightened frames of wrecked trucks. So my dad and his brothers worked for this, uh, frame shop in Alabama, in Montgomery, and whenever trucks got in an accident, they needed to straighten the frame on the truck. They took it down to the frame shop that my dad worked on. He was a diesel engine mechanic. My dad was. And so if a Kenworth or Peterbilt took a 20-ton jack to straighten it out, the Mack would take 40 tons or two 20-ton jacks to straighten it out. When it would take this much pressure to straighten the frame, we would always say, built like a Mack truck. Mack trucks are built in various sizes with different power plants to pull heavy loads up the biggest hills. With heavier frames to with heavier frames, with heavier weight frames, springs, axles, and tires to support big loads without breaking down. I think they had one called a B-71, another called a B-73, and an even bigger one called a B-74. I've I've enclosed a picture of this B-74 that my uncle Charlie had and his daughter Robin in the picture in 1958, before the wreck. A B-75 came out also, maybe later. Uncle Charlie was very proud of it, and I made the mistake once of telling someone it was a B-73, and he corrected me immediately and said, "Son, that was a B-74 Mack." He took me for a short ride in it once when I was a youngster, and it seemed like a very big dark green monster. Now I just want to see if I can actually find a picture of it. I can't find a picture of his truck here, but you know, I imagine it looked something like this guy right here. Um, it's a big, heavy truck, and you can imagine he's talked about, riding cross country in this truck. That's not a cushioned ride there, and you can imagine that would be a lot of bouncing down the freeways, and it'd be real tiring driving that thing, I can imagine. He went up a hill with it, and the hood was so long out front that the hood blocked out the sun for a minute, and I was just looking up at the sky. I could not see the road out front, and I imagined he could not see it either. But he knew it would come back down when we got over the steep hill. Scary. For me as a young kid, I think I was so scared I could not even enjoy the ride. Ha ha! So this truck had a reputation of being a monster truck. The B-71 and B-73 size trucks that had an engine that Mack called the Thermodyne. Well, the B-74 of Uncle Charlie's had an engine Mac called a Maxidine, gobs of power. You- This is my dad here. He's a truck lover because he worked for the railroad and he was a locomotive mechanic and he was a diesel engine mechanic all his life. So Uncle Charlie said it had so much power if you had a heavy load and had the engine revved up too much in the lowest gear, it would strip the rubber threads right off the tires. My uncle drove that truck back and forth across the country for years, hauling heavy loads of produce and putting in a full day of driving, catching a few hours of sleep, driving again for hundreds of miles, trying to deliver the load on time before the load of produce spoils. Even having to pull off the road and work on the refrigeration unit every so many days, sometimes at night, out on the road by flashlight. Scraping the valves, he told me, because the valves would carbon up and make it lose power. Uncle Charlie uh, must have been one tough hombre. I drive an 18-wheeler myself for the last 5 years, over 500,000 miles in 5 years, with an even bigger engine, better highways, big sleeper, big rest stops, and truck plaza. It was still a strain driving 750 miles for 3 days in a row. Uh, Dallas to Cedar City, Utah, then making the return trip just like it back to Dallas, then a third trip of three 750 miles a day again back to Cedar City. I'm telling you, my dad liked to drive, and he would drive hundreds of miles a day, just trying to be efficient and make his pay as a truck driver after he had stopped being a diesel engine mechanic. And my dad says, I earned my pay too, and it was just very tough. I cannot imagine making that trip in the old days on 2-lane blacktop highways. And which brings me to my Uncle Charlie in the hospital. He finally fell asleep at the wheel, maybe 60 miles from home at night on the 1-lane Rooster Bridge near Demopolis, Alabama, crossing the Cahaba River. And so, I mean, this is the bridge here, and I think I've got some images of that. Let's see here. Oh yeah, there's an image of the old Rooster Bridge that he was crossing, and I mean you can see all the trees and stuff in the background, and Alabama's a very green place, and if you're putting in and it gets a lot of rain, and on the side of the road is just grass, and most of the roads around there are raised roads. When I say raised, you look off to the left and to the right, and it's just like as you're looking forward, it's like you're driving through a tunnel of trees, and looking to the left and looking to the right, all you see is trees and downward sloping on both sides of the road down to a lot of swampland. And if you drive off the road and roll your car, which happens down there, then people don't see you. And matter of fact, this is a little bit of a side note, but there's this, section of road here from Selma, Highway 14 to Montgomery. My dad used to call this people used to call this the Widowmaker Highway because of the fact that at nighttime it's very dark. And, if you fell asleep at the wheel, like my Uncle Charlie Madison did, and people did sometimes, you just roll off the road and there's no coming back. And if you roll off the road, then people just drive by and nobody will find you. And so it's a dangerous section of highway around there. So back to my Uncle Charlie's story here, which brings me back to my Uncle Charlie in the hospital. He finally fell asleep at the wheel, maybe 60 miles from home at night on the one-lane Rooster Bridge near Demopolis, Alabama, crossing the Cahaba River. The truck stuck the trestle struck, the truck struck the trestle bridge, folding the front end of that Mack truck in a bear hug around a trestle girder. The truck hit so hard the loaded trailer broke its kingpin off, and that let the trailer keep traveling right through the bridge framing and into the river with a full load of groceries. Of course, it went all the way to the bottom of the river 50 feet below. Uncle Charlie blacked out and must have been out for a while, because by then the highway patrol had got a wrecker to come see about clearing the bridge. This was only a one-lane bridge to carry the traffic both ways, with the red light at each end to control the cars one direction at a time. The trailer broke loose and tried to drag the truck with it, until the kingpin luckily broke loose and let it fall. If it had not, Uncle Charlie would be in the river also, which left the truck hanging over the river. And I could just imagine like a scene from a movie here. You guys have all seen the Schwarzenegger movies or whatever with some kind of cars hanging over a bridge about teeter-tottering about to fall in. I'm just imagining this scene here. Which means no one with any brains would try to shimmy out onto the running board now and try to get Charlie out. How would you be able to hang on to a big man, and all my uncles and aunts are big people, and keep him from landing in the river and you with him? Emergency workers chained the truck to the bridge so it would not fall, and decided to use a cutting torch to remove the big diesel engine, cut a hole in the firewall, and pull him out through the hole. I imagine they figured he was a goner anyway. Which brings me back to the visit in the hospital, a day or two after the wreck. The news had got to my family. My dad loaded our mom and several of our 12 kids and took us to Demopolis from Montgomery to see him once more, as we had heard he had been pulled out, still alive, but in very bad shape. Yes, we thought he would die too. When we got to the hospital room, I did not believe they had my uncle wrapped up like a mummy, head to toes. Both legs and both arms were hanging from traction ropes to keep them straight. He was still alive when we walked in, and my dad said, "Charlie, we thought you were a goner for sure." Charlie said, "I thought I was too, Ross," which my dad's Ross, and my dad's dad is also Ross. Uh, then he told us what happened when they cut. What have I done? Then he told us what happened when they cut the motor mounts to remove the engine and get him out. He had awakened after blacking out during the wreck. Then he heard them talking about cutting the engine out. One of them said, "Be careful with that torch, Joe. There's diesel fuel all around here." "Oh no, they're going to burn me up in my truck," he said. They took they took care, got the motor mounts cut, and the engine fell on my legs and broke both of my legs, and I blacked out again. Well, they got me out, and here I am. His head was completely wrapped, with only a small hole for a straw to be put in his mouth to give him a little water or soup. Well, we all thought Uncle Charlie was hurt so bad all over that he would not make it. We were so relieved he was at least still alive, and we got to see him before he died. I know I loved my Uncle Charlie Madison. Well, he lived and recuperated. And I could not believe the insurance company gave him another truck and he got back in it. Tough hombre. And I think he told me he got it paid for and then sold it. Anyway, he was sewed back together, his broken arms and legs healed straight, and his scalp was sewed back on and grew back, and his eyelids were even sewed back on. At 80 years old, he was the bishop of the ward in Atmore and was a tall, tan, good looking, full blooded Porch Creek Indian. I saw him when he gave the eulogy for my grandma Pearl Dial. Those Indians are tough. Which they got a lot of Indian culture and history down there in the South in Alabama. Um, Hope everyone enjoyed the story. I loved my Uncle Charlie, Ross Stephen Jordan, and again, that's my dad. So anyway, that was a neat story. I really liked it. I wanted to share it with you guys. A little bit lengthy here, but hopefully that inspires you to go back and check out your family history through FamilySearch.org. We have family history specialists, which is Sister Mary Petty and Sister Megan Gardner and Sister Laureen Mace um, and Brother Mark Pratt and even youth temple family history leaders now. So for young people. So we're excited to share this with you. Thanks so much for listening, and hope you have a great day.